Yeah, that's fine.
Hey, he's gonna do it, Nate. Don't worry about it.
Is it short?
That's you. He's gonna do it. Okay. I'm Andrew Price. I'm a software developer. I've no formal training in urbanism, but I run a blog, and it became famous. So if you're interested, I have business cards here. So I'm going to be talking about walkability, what makes a place walkable, and I'm going to show you one thing to do to make your place more walkable in human scale right now. If you look up walkability, you will see complete streets. But complete streets acts that if we simply have sidewalks everywhere, our place would be walkable. But some of the most walkable places I've been don't have sidewalks at all, and in central Arkansas there's an office 3 miles out of town, and the whole way there we've spent a lot of money building pedestrian-friendly roundabouts and sidewalks the whole way back to town, and I guarantee nobody stepped foot on that unless the car broke down. So sidewalks don't really mean anything to do with walkability. So what makes a place walkable? The scale it's built at and the places that are around. So I attended university for my bachelor's degree in Brisbane, Australia, and if we ignore these suburbs, the city centre is actually really compact. Half a mile, which is about a 7-mile walk through a dense urban environment, is about the most I'd consider a reasonable walk to grab lunch. And half a mile walk from the centre covers most of the city. And within that circle, you have several universities, a dozen food courts, department stores, multiple museums, cinemas, and the botanical gardens, and you can commute in on a bus, train, ferry, or drive-in, and you can have a wonderful day out where everything is just minutes walk away. So 3 years ago, I relocated to Central Arkansas for my wife and her family, and now I work in a suburban office campus where I step outside into a parking lot along the highway. Half a mile walk, you have Quiznos and the on-site cafeteria. I'd consider one walkable where everything is minutes away, and one unwalkable, which is dangerous and waste of time unless you're driving. And if you've spent any amount of time living somewhere walkable, you know how independent and liberating it is, and it's from having that sense of freedom and then relocating somewhere that I lost it, that became interested in urbanism. So, American streets tend to be very wide. It's not your fault. Other countries do it too, so don't feel bad. But you tend to dedicate maybe 80–90% of it to cars. And cities are places that house people. So I find something a bit twisted about it when you say 80 or 90% of your place is forbidden for people. It's unsafe, it's dangerous. Keep away from it. And we are a product of our environment. If we want a humane populace, we need to be living in a humane environment. Now, Americans are fully capable of building human-scale places. For example, Branson, Missouri, Cannon Beach, Oregon, Beacon Hill, Boston. This is Beverly Hills, California. This is Provincetown, Massachusetts. And you see it all around us. Unfortunately, your best city planners happen to be in the wrong field, designing amusement parks, shopping malls, and college campuses, all human-scale, all walkable places. And walkability isn't just about scale, but also about having places you want to walk to. And land use in cities can be divided into places, destinations, or non-places, depending between destinations. Now, places include your indoor places where we eat, shop, sleep, entertain, work. And outdoor places include your parks, your gardens, your plazas, and your human-oriented streets. Your non-places are your parking lots, your featureless roads, and green space. And from a walkability perspective, they don't add destinations, they just space out the destinations around. And the difference between green space on the left and a park on the right of someone's yard is that people actually use parks and yards. Children can play, people can eat in the park. And usually a park has a name, green space doesn't. So the purpose of green space is either to prettify the area, because this would look pretty ugly if it was just grey pavement from this road to the parking lot to the building, or to buffer the building from an otherwise unpleasant street. And this is unnatural because if your street was pleasant to start with, you'd get the most value being located up against it, close as possible to the centre of activity, saving space, to make it more walkable. Now, if we look at an aerial map of the city, we can get a good idea of how much space is allocated to places and non-places, that we can come up with a place to non-place ratio. In this example of Phoenix, we color the non-places in red and the places in blue, and you can see the place and non-place ratio. Here's San Francisco, a neighborhood of San Francisco. High place to non-place ratio. Commercial corridor and suburban Little Rock. Now, some of that is underdeveloped land, but the remaining bright red area is all your green space, your freeways, your parking lots, and all that other infrastructure. You can see how few places are supporting all of that infrastructure. So compare these, which is more walkable? And which is getting the money's worth out of the infrastructure? Now, I encourage you to make a map like this of your own cities. And some non-place is necessary infrastructure, but a good city planner should attempt to minimize it as much as possible. Now, at the start of the presentation, I promised to show you something you can do right now to make your cities more walkable and human scale. The most walkable cities tend to have narrow streets, small blocks, and a very fine drain. However, American cities, your typical towns, are full of all these wide streets and large blocks. And unfortunately, attempting to build narrow streets run into opposition from regulations and special interests that fight for wide streets. Fortunately, American cities are full of narrow streets, you just don't know it. Alleys, they're everywhere. I've seen them in every American city I've been to. And before we fight to build more narrow streets, we need to better utilize the ones we have first. Now, to inspire you with what is possible, I'm going to return to Australia, to the city of Melbourne. And in the mid-1990s, Melbourne started a program known as laneway activation. And as part of the program, here's an alley that wasn't part of the program, so you see what they typically look like, just like any typical American one. And as part of the program, the city cleaned up the alleys, they changed the regulations and encouraged on-street dining and the development of the inner blocks. This is from another city, actually my hometown Adelaide, where they started a similar program. You can see what it looks like in its infancy, and I've even heard cases of building owners cutting out holes in their sidewalks and profiting from leasing the new space. Back to Melbourne. This is a decade later, it's fully matured, and you can see, and here's another one, you can see what a dramatic difference this makes. Here's another one. Here's another one. And this one in particular became a cultural icon for the city. And they doubled as pedestrian shortcuts for a city that otherwise has large blocks and wide streets and large blocks. And that's great. So they attract a lot of foot traffic, and that's great for the businesses along the alleys. Now, you can do this in any American city. You don't have to build anything, you don't have to buy anything, just change the regulations and you can do that cheaply with what you already have. So walkability is about the scale of the environment, places it around, and also the perception of safety, which I don't have time to get into. But I did show you one thing you could do, and the key to all of this is to not waste land. Treat land as if it's the most precious commodity your city has, and everything else will start coming naturally to you. So if you think this is interesting, you can visit my blog, AndrewPriceWalkability.com, where I go into this stuff in far more detail, or pick up a business card, and on my blog you can find links to other people with similar insights to me, or if you see me walking around, feel free to come up for a chat. Thank you.